Like, he's not on anyone's top 10 list. He's not like no one's top 10 list, maybe not even his family.
He's scared to hustle because niggas is snitching so much. Maybe that's what's going on. I would be scared to hustle too when I know that every other nigga is snitching just so he don't want to do no time because he can't bear to be inside the jail.
The hip-hop world has always thrived on secrets, rivalries, and explosive reveals. But this is on another level. Word has spread about a so-called secret tape, a recording where Jay-Z himself allegedly unleashes on Jim Jones, tearing down his credibility and leaving nothing but smoke and rubble behind. The message: you were never real. For decades, Jay-Z has been careful with his words, strategic, calculated, rarely impulsive. That's why the idea of a hidden recording is so shocking. It suggests that behind closed doors, Jay-Z may have been far more direct, far more brutal, and far more willing to cut down his rivals than we ever imagined. And Jim Jones, a man who has built his entire reputation on authenticity, loyalty, and Harlem grit. To be told he was never real cuts deeper than any diss track could. This isn't just about one man versus another. It's about hip-hop identity, about the eternal question of what makes someone real in a culture that values loyalty and credibility above all else. Tonight, we're breaking it down, the context behind the tape, the raw words allegedly spoken, the reactions from fans and insiders, and what it all means for Jim Jones, Jay-Z, and the legacy of East Coast rap itself. To understand why this so-called secret tape has everyone buzzing, you've got to go back to the roots of the Jay-Z and Jim Jones saga. Hip-hop beefs don't exist in isolation. They're born out of years of alliances, betrayals, and shifting loyalties. And when we talk about Jay-Z and Jim Jones, we're really talking about the wider world of Dipset, ROC-A-Fella, and the East Coast dominance wars that defined the early 2000s back then. Jay-Z was already on his way to becoming the undisputed king of New York rap. ROC-A-Fella was booming. His music was dominating the charts. And his reach went far beyond music, business deals, fashion, culture, everything. Jim Jones, meanwhile, was carving his path with the Diplomats, aka Dipset. Alongside Cam'ron and Juelz Santana, he built a cult following, especially in Harlem. Their swagger, their fashion, their unapologetic attitude. It gave them a unique brand that fans loved. But as Dipset rose, tensions with ROC-A-Fella and Jay-Z simmered. It wasn't always direct, but there was always friction. Cam'ron openly clashed with Jay in interviews, calling out his leadership, questioning his moves, and positioning himself as a rival. Jim Jones, as Cam's right-hand man, naturally became part of that feud. Even when Jay didn't address it head-on, the streets knew. There was no love lost between Hav and the Dips. Fast forward to the mid-2000s, Jay-Z was cementing his status as a mogul, taking on executive roles at Def Jam, while Jim Jones was pushing to establish himself not just as Cam's lieutenant, but as a solo force. Songs like We Fly High catapulted him into mainstream fame. But here's where the narrative started to split. Jay's brand was polished, global, and carefully managed. Jim's brand was raw, gritty, and deeply tied to Harlem authenticity. And in hip-hop, authenticity is everything. That's what makes the alleged tape so explosive. According to the rumors, the recording wasn't just Jay throwing shade, it was him dismantling Jim Jones' entire image, saying outright that he was never real, that the loyalty he preached was smoke and mirrors, that he thrived on playing second fiddle. If true, it wasn't just an attack, it was an execution. Because calling someone not real in this culture is like pulling the plug on their entire credibility. Scrutiny of Jim Jones' career only adds fuel to the fire. His ups and downs have always been public. The highs of Dipset reunions, the lows of group fallouts, his clashes with Cam'ron, his legal troubles, and his relentless hustle to stay relevant. Fans see him as a survivor, but critics argue he's always been more hype man than headliner. If Jay really did say, "You were never real," it's like putting words to doubts that have followed Jim for years. At the same time, it's important to remember who we're talking about. Jay-Z isn't someone who wastes words. When he speaks with strategy. Every bar, every interview, every statement is calculated. That's why the concept of a secret tape feels both shocking and believable. Shocking because Jay rarely lets unfiltered emotions slip into the public. Believable because behind closed doors, even the most controlled artists vent. And sometimes those vents get recorded. What's also key here is the fan reaction. Even before hearing the so-called tape, people started debating what it meant. Team Jay argued that he had every right to call out pretenders, that he's always been about separating the real from the fake. Team Jim fired back, saying Jay was threatened by Harlem Energy, that Dipset's rawness represented the streets in ways Jay never could. Suddenly, this wasn't just about two men. It was about two different visions of hip-hop authenticity colliding again. Years after the original beef cooled down, industry insiders added their own spin. Some claimed Jay had always held grudges against Dipset for disrespecting him in the Roc-A-Fella days. Others whispered that Jim Jones had tried to patch things up behind the scenes, but Jay never fully trusted him. In this light, a tape where Jay lays out his true feelings doesn't sound far-fetched. It sounds like unfinished business. Finally, it's coming to the surface. By the time the rumors hit social media, the hype had reached fever pitch. Memes circulated of Jay dropping his signature smirk alongside captions like "Never Real." Old Dipset videos resurfaced, with fans dissecting every moment for signs of cracks in Jim's credibility. Reaction channels jumped on the trend, analyzing what the tape, if real, meant for Jim Jones' career. And just like that, an old rivalry was reborn in the digital age, fueled by nothing more than whispers of a secret recording. When the whispers of a secret tape turned into an actual leak, hip-hop fans went into full detective mode. The recording wasn't polished. It didn't sound like a studio track. It was grainy, muffled, the kind of audio that felt like it had been captured without permission. Maybe in a backroom meeting, maybe during a private conversation. That's what made it so compelling. At first, all you could hear was Jay-Z's unmistakable voice, cool, calm, but carrying that authority he's known for. Then came the line that lit the culture on fire. Jim was never real. He played the part, but the streets know the truth. Those words hit like a gunshot in the middle of a silent room. To call someone never real isn't just shade, it's character assassination in hip-hop terms. And this wasn't a bar on a diss track. This was Jay allegedly speaking unfiltered, without an audience, without cameras. The intimacy of it made it sting harder. The tape didn't stop there. Jay supposedly broke down specifics, saying Jim rode Cameron's wave, that his biggest moments came as a sidekick, and that his attempts to brand himself as Harlem's leader were always smoke and mirrors. He built his name on someone else's shine. DJ's voice seemed to say, "That's not real, that's opportunism, whether authentic or not." Those words spread instantly across Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Reaction videos popped up overnight. Some creators paused the tape line by line, dissecting Jay's tone and intent. Others compared it to old interviews where Jay had sidestepped questions about Dipset, claiming this was the truth he never said publicly. The fallout for Jim Jones was immediate. Memes flooded timelines. Clips of Jim's past interviews where he insisted on his authenticity were stitched with Jay's alleged words, "Never real." Fans debated whether Jim's entire image as Harlem's soldier had just been dismantled in under a minute. But not everyone bought it. Some loyal Dipset fans pushed back, arguing the tape was fake, a deepfake audio cooked up by trolls to stir drama. They pointed to inconsistencies in the background noise, the lack of context, the possibility that DJ's voice had been spliced from old interviews. If Jay really said this, why is it leaking now? Skeptics asked. Why wasn't it ever mentioned during the height of their beef? Still, others argued that the timing made sense. With both men enjoying renewed attention, Jay through his business moves, Jim through features and interviews, a leak like this would naturally reignite an old rivalry. Whether planted by haters or not, the damage was already done. People were talking, and in hip-hop, perception often outweighs proof. Inside the industry, reactions were split as well. Some rappers laughed it off, saying they weren't surprised if Jay really felt that way. Others defended Jim, calling him a hustler who carved his lane through sheer determination. A few even suggested the tape was strategic, that Jay, the master chess player, might have let something slip to remind everyone who still ran New York. Meanwhile, Jim Jones himself faced the storm. At first, he stayed quiet, letting the chatter build. Then, during a late-night Instagram Live, he finally addressed it. His response was classic Jim, part defensive, part motivational, and fully Harlem. Real. Man, I've been real my whole life. Ain't nobody put in work for me. If Hav got something to say, he can say it to my face. But don't let no tape fool you. That response only added fuel to the fire. Some fans praised him for standing tall, refusing to let Jay define him. Others saw it as weakness, proof that the tape had gotten under his skin. The narrative was spinning out of control. And Jim was left fighting not just Jay-Z's words, but the internet's echo chamber. The most fascinating part of the fallout was how quickly fans divided into camps. Team Jay saw the tape as confirmation of what they'd always believed. Jim was never on Hav's level. And Dipset's biggest moments were always overshadowed by ROC-A-Fella's dominance. Team Jim argued that Jay was jealous of Dipset's cultural impact. That Harlem had a swagger Jay could never replicate. And that dismissing Jim as never real was just another way of downplaying Harlem's contribution to hip-hop. As the debate raged, commentators started raising bigger questions. What does real even mean in hip-hop anymore? Is it about street credibility, loyalty to your crew, surviving beefs without switching sides? Or is it about longevity, the ability to evolve and stay relevant? If Jim built his name off Cameron's shine, does that make him less real, or just smart enough to seize the opportunity? And if Jay-Z, the ultimate hustler turned mogul, is calling someone else fake, what does that say about the blurred lines between authenticity and ambition? By now, the tape had taken on a life of its own. Authentic or not, it forced fans to confront old wounds, old rivalries, and old definitions of credibility. Jim Jones wasn't just defending himself against Jay-Z's voice, he was defending himself against a culture that constantly asks one question: are you real or are you fake? By the time the so-called secret tape had made its rounds across every platform, it didn't even matter whether it was authentic or not. The narrative had already taken root. In hip-hop, perception is often more powerful than proof. And this perception was brutal. Jay-Z, the untouchable mogul, calling Jim Jones never real. For Jim, the fallout was immediate. Interviews that once focused on his music now veered into tape territory. Journalists asked whether he heard it, what his reaction was, whether he would respond with a track of his own. He couldn't escape it. Even memes took over. Clips of Jim shouting, "We fly high," were remixed with Jay's never real line. A cruel reminder that public opinion can turn humor into humiliation overnight. But if Jim has proven anything throughout his career, it's resilience. Harlem Energy has always been about pushing through setbacks, flipping criticism into fuel. On stage, Jim leaned into his identity as the survivor. He told fans, tape or no tape, I'm still here, I'm still working. And Harlem still got my back. The cheer suggested that, at least in his city, loyalty remained strong. For Jay, the impact was different. He didn't need to respond. His silence became its own statement. Jay-Z doesn't play the game of online clapbacks or Instagram lives. He operates on a level where his legacy speaks louder than any rumor. And that, ironically, gave the tape even more weight. If Jay wasn't denying it, fans assumed maybe there was truth in it. Industry voices added layers to the debate. Some insiders suggested Jay never respected Jim's come-up, viewing him as an accessory rather than a headliner. Others claimed DJ's alleged comments revealed frustration with how Dipset once challenged ROC-A-Fella's dominance. But almost everyone agreed. The tape reignited a rivalry many thought was long buried. The bigger question became cultural. What does it mean to be real in hip-hop in 2025? In the early days, real meant street credibility, surviving beefs, standing by your crew, paying dues in the neighborhood. For Jay, authenticity evolved into mogul status, building an empire, staying untouchable, never folding. For Jim, authenticity meant loyalty to Harlem, loyalty to Dipset, loyalty to the streets that raised him. Two different definitions, colliding in one explosive leak. Fans were left to wrestle with those definitions. Some argued Jim could never be called fake because his grind. His loyalty to Kamran and his cultural impact with Dipset were undeniable. Others argued Jay was right, that being real isn't about loyalty alone, but about evolution. If Jim never broke past being Cam's shadow, maybe Jay's words hit harder than anyone wanted to admit. The irony. Both men represent two sides of hip-hop authenticity. Jay embodies the chess master, strategic, polished, unshakable. Jim embodies the scrapper, raw, relentless, imperfect but persistent. The tape forced fans to ask themselves which version of real they respected more. As the weeks rolled on, storms slowly settled, but the echoes remained. Jim doubled down on new music, dropping bars about loyalty and survival without naming names. Jay, as always, stayed silent, letting the culture debate itself into exhaustion. But the impact lingered, a reminder that in hip-hop, credibility can be built over decades and questioned in seconds. And that's the real power of this story. The tape, Real or Fake, revealed how fragile reputations are in the internet age. How a single phrase, whispered or recorded, can rewrite years of narrative. How fans, always hungry for drama, can resurrect old rivalries and magnify them tenfold. So, was Jay right? Was Jim never real? Or was this just another example of hip-hop's obsession with tearing down its own? That's for the audience to decide. Because in the end, realness isn't defined by one man's words, it's defined by the culture that watches, debates, and passes judgment. And if there's one thing this saga proves, it's that in hip-hop, the conversation never ends. The beef never dies. The tapes never stay hidden. And that's the breakdown, a so-called secret tape. Jay-Z's alleged words and Jim Jones caught in the middle. But now I want to hear from you. Do you think Jim has always been real to Harlem? Or was Jay right all along? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this debate isn't ending anytime soon. If you enjoyed this deep dive, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next hip-hop breakdown. Trust me, we've got more drama, more history, and more truth bombs coming your way. Truth bombs coming your way.